Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Kaufman, the Sullivan and Cromwell Access to Justice staff attorney at the ACLU. I'm pleased to present the Access to Justice Award to Sidley Austin for their contributions to the Jennings v. Rodriguez case. Now, this is actually Sidley's fourth award for the case. You might be wondering, what does it take to receive 4 separate awards for one case? Well, how about over a decade of hard-fought litigation, 3 Ninth Circuit appeals that set important precedent concerning the due process rights of detained immigrants, and a trip to the Supreme Court, which heard arguments this past November. Along the way, we've won injunctions requiring the government to provide bond hearings to people detained for prolonged periods, resulting in the release of over 5,000 class members just in Southern California, and at least 5,000 more in this circuit and elsewhere in the nation. That includes people like Marco Alfaro Garcia. His 2 young daughters, ages 4 and 3, are featured in the picture you see up on the screens. Marco was separated from his family when he was put in deportation proceedings in 2014 and sought asylum. In the nights that followed, his daughters cried themselves to sleep, begging for their father's return. Finally, after 6 months in detention, Marco won his release at a Rodriguez bond hearing, allowing Marco to return home to his daughters, where he remains today. We have been fortunate to have exceptional partners at Sidley throughout our decade-long struggle. For most of that time, Sean Commons has been at the core of Sidley's team. Sean is everything you could hope for in a co-counsel. He's kind and generous, has a brilliant legal mind, and unwavering commitment to our clients. Wen Shen likewise dedicated herself to the case and made critical contributions. Most recently, Mark Haddad joined the team at the Supreme Court stage, contributing his considerable insight and experience to help us craft our briefs and arguments for the High Court. Now, while I don't know what the Supreme Court will decide in the case, and stay tuned, the decision is probably coming on Monday, I do know that our clients will continue to benefit from the extraordinary representation of the Sidley team. Please join me in congratulating Sean and the rest of the team on the Access to Justice Award.
Though life can definitely throw us some curveballs, I still firmly believe you can do well by doing good. And we've heard a lot today about people doing a lot of good. We have on the stage 3 of us, and Geneva's hiding in the corner over there. But more than 100 people have worked on this case. Our firm has contributed more than 30 to that effort. Most recently, after the election, we had people actually banging down the door to offer to help, and 20 law students were proofreading, site-checking briefs. I had students tell me that periods were italicized when they shouldn't be. Even my family and friends were asking, is there some way they could contribute? And sure enough, there was. They were proofreading briefs. My mother, who came here today, taught me about 3 more rules of grammar along the way. So the takeaway really is you don't have to be a lawyer to care about the Constitution, and you certainly don't have to be a lawyer to support the mission of the ACLU. And on behalf of Sidley, Mark, and Wen, thank you very much for this recognition.
Hello. You figured you need a greeting. Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Goodman, the Audrey Ermis Director of the LGBTQ Gender and Reproductive Justice Project. Thank you. When We Rise tells an essential history of the LGBTQ rights movement. It's a history that the ACLU of Southern California helped to bring about. When We Rise starts in 1971, but nearly 20 years before, when being gay was still deemed a mental disorder, when the LAPD was raiding gay bars on a regular basis, and gay rights groups were starting to form, but had to meet entirely in secret, our then executive director met with one of those groups, the Mattachine Society. Then in 1965, we became the very first ACLU affiliate in the country to draft a policy saying that privacy in sexual relations between consenting adults is a constitutional right. Then in 1970, when LA denied Christopher Street West's application for a pride parade, we fought back, heading a successful legal action that resulted in the first ever permitted pride parade. Woo. Since then, we have shown up for gay and lesbian rights and for transgender rights at every opportunity. Too commonly these days, our movement is reduced to the story of marriage equality. But When We Rise shows that it was and is much more than that. A movement to establish that love is love, yes, but also to demand freedom from police violence and profiling, to demand safety, the ability to work, to access health care, the freedom to express our gender and to not be confined by gender stereotypes, and to demand dignity and respect for our very identities. When We Rise also reminds us that in this moment, we must learn from our history and resolve to keep moving forward and never back. In the clip you're about to see, you can feel the frustration of LGBTQ activists as they struggled with bias and the injustice of having their civil liberties decided by a popular vote. So take a look.
Hello. Our country has a long history of pitting minorities against each other, horrifically playing on fear and ignorance to get people to vote against their own interests, to keep people separate and struggling. So to tell a story where members of different minority causes, people from vastly different experiences, the peace movement, the black civil rights movement, the women's movement, the gay rights movement, transgender movement, when they come together, learn from each other, send a strong message of hope that maybe one day we can finally put a stop to this madness that wounds our country by dividing us, by making us weaker, and show us what amazing power we have when we all unite. Now, the person responsible for telling this story is Dustin Lance Black. When We Rise is the first series of its kind on network television. Lance has created something in When We Rise that not only honors the great minds and the hearts of the people that are directly responsible for bettering our lives today, but it also gives a younger generation a picture of these heroes. And that inspiration will have a ripple effect more powerful than we know. Lance has devoted many years of his writing and directing career to telling our community's stories, and maybe even more importantly, widening what defines our community. That inclusion makes up the very core of this human being. And for that, I couldn't be more proud to present the ACLU Social Advocacy in the Media Award to newlywed Dustin Lance Black.
Oh, wow, I'm nervous. I have to say, no matter whatever happens with this show, this is and will be the most meaningful award I'll ever receive for this show, because it was a we thing, and that's what the ACLU is built on, not a me thing, but a we thing. So I need to recognize some of our we. that are here. Bruce Cohen, Jessica Borshiski, who are my powerful, unwavering, inexhaustible producers. Of course, T.R. Knight, Guy Pearce, Kevin McHale, who brought the real lives of some of our great social justice heroes to life on screen that will hopefully inspire. I call her my assistant, but Miranda DeVozo, who's really my right hand and keeps me together at every turn. And last but certainly not least, this man does not get enough recognition for what he does. And he was my great champion, saying, yes, it is possible to get a social justice miniseries on a network like ABC so that the world can bear witness, and that is my agent, Joe Cohen. You know, this show, the idea of this show, sorry, I just flew in from London. I feel like I might be on mushrooms right now. Everything's a little squishy. I don't think that's protected yet. Now I'm going to get in trouble. This show started as the idea for it started as I was walking up the steps of the U.S. Supreme Court with the ACLU at our side to fight for marriage equality. And it started because as I was walking up those steps, I started to worry. I started to worry that because of all the great progress we were making, my community that I hold so dear had become myopic, self-interested. We had stopped fighting as hard for our brothers and sisters and other social justice movements as we had for ourselves, and it scared me. You know, Harvey Milk, my great hero, did not get elected by just saying, LGBT people, come vote for me. No. He reached out to the unions, to the workers who couldn't put their talented kids through college, and he held protests for them, boycotts for them, so that they could. He reached out to the minority groups in San Francisco who were not being represented accurately at the ballot box. And he built a coalition of the us's, including seniors who couldn't afford to live in the homes that they had built in the city that they had created. And with that coalition of the us's, he started to win. And I thought, what's happened to that coalition of the us's? You know, I go to gay marches, and I hear gay, straight, black, white, same struggle, same fight, but I don't see enough LGBTQ people showing up visibly to Black Lives Matter marches. And so I wrote When We Rise as a warning that if we were divided, not out of animus, but drunk on our own successes, if we were divided, we could be conquered. And sadly, in some ways, we have. But do we give up? Is that the lesson of When We Rise? Is that the lesson of the ACLU? Hell no. The lesson is we have to rise up and lock arms and see our interconnectedness with other social justice movements and start to march forward again. What do we do with the ACLU? When they come after our neighbors, black and brown and white, we rise up. When they come after our neighbors, LGBT and Q, what do? We rise up. What do we do when they come after our neighbors, natural born or undocumented? We must rise and protect all of the us's out there and rebuild that coalition of the us's so we can get the pendulum of progress moving forward again. Thank you so much to the ACLU for this award and the great work that you do. Thank you. Thank you.
Profound. She has prevented our city from punitive action, prodding it into adopting positive solutions, and she has held city officials accountable for those promises. She has defended the rights of protesters nationwide, and as you saw, she became a victim of suppression when she was shot by the police during a protest. For her fearless and creative advocacy, Carol Sobel was named a Los Angeles super lawyer for civil rights, and I cannot think of an award that's more appropriate. Carol Sobel served our ACLU for 20 years, first as the associate director and chief shoe shopper,
and then for 7 years as a senior staff attorney. When I joined the ACLU, those many years ago, Carol was my teacher and my boss. As an ACLU staff attorney, she became my colleague. And now, she is my co-teacher in the Loyola Law School Civil Rights Litigation Practicum, where Carol helps to train the next generation, several of whom are sitting at her table, drum majors for justice. Carol Sobel was and is my colleague, my friend, and my inspiration. It is not often that a former employee and a current colleague can publicly praise and perhaps publicly embarrass just a little bit someone who has meant so much to me and civil rights. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to do both. I now present the recipient of our Lifetime Advocate for Justice Award, Ms. Carol Sobel.
So we're at the end, and I know you all want to go home, so you have to sit down. I'm going to flip what I was going to say, because if I don't do it this way, I'm going to get really verklempt at the end. And for those of you who don't speak Yiddish or haven't watched Mike Myers as Linda Richmond on Saturday Night Live, I can translate, but I think you'll be able to tell. When I came to Los Angeles, the ACLU was in a little office on Skid Row, just at the edge of Skid Row, over a wig shop at 5th and Main. And I didn't work for the ACLU then, but I worked for the chairman of the foundation of the ACLU, Stanley Scheinbaum. And I remember a day in August of 1972, I was here, and Mark Rosenbaum, who's over there, was here as well as a law student. And I was raising money and scheduling Daniel Ellsberg in the Pentagon Papers trial, and Mark was working for Leonard Boudin and Leonard Weinglass, which is where we met and where we've been friends ever since. And we were in the Barclay Hotel, which, if you know it, it's downtown on, I think, on Main and or Spring and 4th or something like that. So the ACLU was right nearby. And this woman walked in. We used to get a lot of celebrities who would drop in. You know, they would come, it was their only trip downtown, but they wanted to see if they could see Dan Ellsberg. So this incredibly gorgeous blonde woman walked in one day, and I thought, wow, who is she? I don't know her. And, you know, I'm a television watcher, so I think I know a lot of people. And we are here today, and the ACLU is as big as it is today because of her. So I want to introduce Ramona Ripston. And I just want to tell you, if you don't know Ramona, you should read about her. She built the ACLU here. She actually quit the ACLU. She was the co-executive director in the ACLU New Jersey in the 1960s with Hank DeSuvero, I always tease her about this, her third husband. And they quit the ACLU when the ACLU refused to take a position against the war in Vietnam. She was gone for a few years, and then she came here to replace Easton Monroe. Ramona built this ACLU. She built the national ACLU. She pushed them forward in ways they had never been pushed before. And she hired me, she hired Mark, she hired Gary, she hired a lot of people, Paul Hoffman, and she made the ACLU the voice for justice in this community, a stronger voice than it had ever been. I am so honored to have been a part of that. I think for a lawyer, probably the biggest honor you can get is being called an ACLU lawyer. And even though I left 20 years ago, I'm still called the ACLU lawyer, which is okay with them, they told me. So I've been with the ACLU in one capacity or another for about 40 years, and just so you understand, I'm not emotional because of the ACLU. I'm really emotional because of Ramona. I interviewed for my job at the ACLU in December of 1976, shortly before the events in Skokie, Illinois, where the ACLU represented the Nazis. But there was another incident here in Los Angeles at around the same time. And when I came for my interview, Irv Rubin and the Jewish Defense League were sitting in the lobby of the ACLU and protesting. And the president of the ACLU was there for my interview, as was Ramona. And he wanted Ramona to call the police. And I'm telling this story because I think it stands for the principles of the ACLU. He wanted Ramona to call the police and have the JDL arrested or removed. And Ramona refused. And instead, what she did is she went out and she said to them, "We're going to stay here as long as you want to stay here. I'm ordering pizza for the staff. Do you want some?" And I thought, wow, this was incredible. I wanted to work there, and I did get to work there. So I want to just thank all the incredible lawyers that I got to work with over the years at the ACLU. I've gotten an opportunity to work with a lot of the younger lawyers that you've seen today, Hector and Ahilan, Peter Biebring, who wasn't here but was on film, Michael Kaufman, my friend Peter Eliasberg. I thank them all for everything they taught me. I became a better lawyer because of them. I have to thank Gary, because although I was his boss, he then became my boss when I moved to the legal staff. And for those of you who don't know me, and for those of you who do, I'm a little difficult. I'll be really, and I know it. I have a certain degree of charm, too. But, it's not surprising that one of my opposing counsel once suggested that I should have gone to charm school instead of law school. But I took it as a compliment. But I also have to thank, in addition to Gary, my next supervisor was the extraordinary Mark Rosenbaum. And of course, Paul Hoffman, who was the legal director and who continues to be my friend and somebody I work with. So I also just want to mention a few of my cooperating counsel. Over the course of 40 years, I've had a lot of them, but a couple stand out. And I don't mean to slight anybody by not including them, but when I said, when Gary described my personality earlier, my very first cooperating counsel for the ACLU was David Lash, who's here someplace back there, right? And I'll let David tell you stories, if you're interested, about our meeting with Kindle and Anderson in a case where we sat through 45 minutes of them lecturing us until I asked the senior partner, "Are you done?" And then told him, "Don't you ever talk to us that way again." And David very nicely said, "We didn't talk before we came in here about what we were going to say, but I agree completely." And with that, it changed the dynamic. And David and his sister Karen have been my friend as well. But I also have to single out 3 other people. And I also want to say, we've watched all this stuff about the serious lawsuits. And certainly I did a lot of very serious lawsuits while I was at the ACLU. And one was against the Los Angeles Police Department, where they had 12 sexual assaults, coworker sexual assaults, rapes. We sued on behalf of all the women in the department for sexual harassment, sexual discrimination. And one of my clients in the case is a friend of Mia Yamamoto, who you saw in the video and who's at the same table as I am. And she posted, in response to Mia posting a picture of us, to thank me for the work that we did for the women of the LAPD. And that was really, it's an affirmation of how important our work is. But having said that, I have to tell you, I had incredible fun. And I continue to have fun. But I never had more fun than in the early days of the ACLU, working with Mark and Ramona and the other lawyers. We had, we had more fun than we should have been allowed to have, given what we were doing. But the other three people I want to just quickly mention, and they're not here today, but they all have really good excuses, I'm telling you. Barry Litt, Connie Rice, and Doug Morrell. And Connie has been my partner in crime with the LAPD for about 30 years now, and Barry Litt was our co-counsel and put up with us, and that takes a lot. If you know Connie and you know me, that takes a lot, but Barry was amused. And then Doug Morrell was just the greatest cooperating counsel who, if I called him up and said, I need you to help on a case, he would say, I can't do it, Carol, unless it involves the First Amendment. I'll say, it involves the First Amendment, here's my theory. And Doug would say, okay. You know, and so I encourage any of you, if you haven't, you know, a lot of lawyers in this room, if you haven't volunteered for the ACLU, I really encourage you to do it, because the secret is that it's both rewarding and incredible fun. I thank the ACLU for this honor, and I honor the ACLU.
Thank you all for coming today. Please don't forget to sign up for Constitution Day. Download our Mobile Justice California app. You'll find it in the App Store. Get your parking validated at the check-in table if you haven't already. And please give your donation cards to the staff on the way out. And we look forward to seeing you next year. We hope you had a great time this year. We're so glad you came. Thank you very much.